Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. My guest today should be very interesting. Autry Pruitt. He's a managing partner at Spencer Pruitt and government expert. So he's a government expert, Trump Campaign Surrogate, columnist, radio show host. So we're going to talk about his book, Planes, Steak, and Water, Defending Donald J. Trump and His Christian Faith. So Autry, welcome and thanks for coming.
I thank you so much, Richard, for having me on the Finding Genius podcast, having me on board. I appreciate you greatly. Anyone that's got a platform that's putting out material for individuals to learn and to digest and to ask questions and to expand their global mindset certainly deserves praise. In my book, it is a great honor.
Thank you. So, I just got the book in the mail from you. Thank you for sending it literally like a day ago. When I glanced over it quick, it seemed to talk about 2016 in the election. So just quickly for potential readers of the book, does it cover everything from the first time Trump was elected till now, or is it only focused on the first time?
No, the book is only focused on the first time, his first run for office in 2016. It's not focused on this time. I'm writing a different book, but it's not going to be on Trump. There's enough Trump books out there now, so.
I thought the new one, it would be like Planes, McDonald's, and RFK instead of like Planes, Steak, and Water.
Well, the book title came from Mitt Romney gave a speech back in 2015, and he went after Donald Trump, and he said, what happened to Trump Planes? What happened to Trump Steak? What happened to Trump Water? And they all failed. And I argued in the book, the whole point of the book is to argue this point. Mitt Romney missed the point. The point was that Trump tried. And what we've had a failure of is government peoples on both sides of the aisle, but I come from the right side. Government individuals on both sides of the aisle have always made these promises. We're going to move to Jerusalem. We're going to cut deficit. We're going to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. And they never even try because they get scared. And so where Mitt Romney criticized Donald Trump for actually trying, I praised him for trying and say, listen, you may try only 50 things and 5 work out. But you try nothing, then nothing will ever work out,
Maybe as a way to push back, they should report to the media like, oh, a Trump plane was found suiciding itself mysteriously, so the program won't work. That would be more akin to sending the message back to the other side.
Yes. Yeah.
So what inspired you to write this book? And did you write it just recently, or did you write it a while ago and you're waiting to put it out?
I wrote this book. A while ago, and I put it out a while ago, and then recently it took off for some reason, and people wanted it to go back in time and to read. I think people go back in time and started to read. Well, what were we saying in 2016? People didn't laugh me off. They said it's a joke. They said, and now people are saying, wait a second. There's something to this Trump guy. So not only my book, but a lot of the other older Trump books have seen a resurgence. And that's essentially what happened. What prompted me to write the book then was very simple. I saw early, even though it was published in 16, I wrote it in 15. And I saw early on what was happening. And what was happening was that the American electorate, the body politic, if you will, was desperate. They were desperate for somebody to try something, anything, to change people's personal narrative, right, on both sides of the aisle. And when Trump came along, individuals said, you know what? Let's just give it a try, because the old guard wasn't working anymore. The old elite wasn't working. And so that was the crux of the issue. It wasn't because Donald Trump was so special, although he is unique. It wasn't because he's arguing about immigration. Said before, Buchanan. Buchanan, I was going to say O'Brien. Patrick Buchanan had argued that before. It was the fact that Donald Trump was in a moment where people said, you know what, we got to throw something to the wall and see if it sticks. People then got backlash against it with Biden, and Trump loses, barely so, but he loses about 70,000 votes across 5 states. And then people said, wait a second, it's the same old stuff. The media is not telling the truth. It's clear that President Biden has rapidly started declining. It's clear that Vice President Kamala Harris is lying about certain activities. It's clear that the Republicans are playing games again. So they said, you know what? We need to go back and do Donald Trump one more time. So that's why the book is seen that resurgence. I identified very early on what was going on in the body politic.
No, I have amazing respect for Donald Trump. I don't know of any human being that has been abused to this level and still continues besides Jesus. I mean, it's unbelievable. I couldn't withstand constant attacks for years and years and years. I don't know how he does it. It's amazing.
At some point, you just give up. But I think certainly between $8 and $20 billion would help you do it. An insular family will help you do it. But what helps you do it the most is 2 things. The first thing is Donald Trump's more recent belief in this come to Jesus moment over the years. And then the second thing is at some point, there's nothing else to lose. You know, you think about, I've always thought about it like, think about it from the bottom, right? You think about from the bottom, you say, you know what, if a man has it's all out, he's got nothing else to lose, he's dangerous. Well, if you think about it, if a man is all out and gained everything he possibly can gain, he's in his 80s, he's not afraid of losing anything, obviously, he's dangerous too. This is why I believe, actually, from a Christian perspective, is why I believe Donald Trump was elected the first time, and it's along those same lines. And so I think that's where we misconception. Donald Trump was a man with nothing to lose. And we didn't think about that. We were thinking about, oh, what if he goes to prison? What if he goes to jail? What if he goes? But from his perspective, he had spent and achieved everything in his 75 years of life. He'd been a billionaire. He'd had every woman he wanted, every church he wanted to be in with, every device he wanted to have, every plane, every flight, every place in the world he wanted to meet. He had done it. So he really had nothing else to lose and mostly everything to gain. It was like stepping up to a roulette table and placing it all on black.
I guess one thing I worry about is, even though he survived all these problems, I don't know. I would think he'd be like mentally seriously traumatized by all this, which would not make him more dangerous, but it would just make sense. Like, again, he's been traumatized to where he's like, I don't care anymore. I'm going to do this and that. And again, I would feel like he has no fear anymore, but because of all that's been done to him, it would be incredibly hard not to want to retaliate. And he's not, but where does that angst go? Can he channel it all into the work, or are we going to see some weird, like post-traumatic stress freakouts from him because of what he's been through?
I'm hoping that he's channeled it into God. I'm hoping he's let go and let God, which may be his brush with death. From what I've told, I haven't spoken to him since the second election, but I am told that his brush with death, that probably is what made him fortified, in a sense that he may be called to a moment in time to do something great. When Trump first got elected, I alluded to this earlier, Richard, when Trump first got elected, I thought to myself that what happened was this. We read in the Bible where God talks about taking the least of them and making them great. We always think about the poor, the downtrodden, right? Those who are on the streets. But we didn't realize that Donald Trump in the Christian world was the least of them. He was a billionaire, philanderer, going around. You remember the grab him by the cat video
Mm-hmm.
that was released?
Oh, yeah.
And
That
so
was
for
really
Christians,
funny.
so for Christians, he was the more repugnant. And what I believe happened was that as the church began to pray, God said, okay, you know what? I've given you who you wanted. You wanted the Bushes, you wanted Reagan, you wanted Ted Cruz, you wanted Rubio, you wanted all these people that on the outside projected faith, and you rejected them.
Mm.
So I'm going to take the least one of you, the least that you expect, and I'm going to show you what I can do. So that's what happens the first time around, right? Then
Good.
MAGA world and the conservative world, they get a little arrogant. And God says, okay, I think you're forgetting who got you here in the first place. And he steps back, Trump loses. And then all of a sudden everybody comes back to Jesus and the cross says, okay, you know what? I'm going to try to heal this land again. I actually believe, and I had a sermon based upon this, but I actually believe that Trump's election was an answer to the prayers of conservatives, because the conservatives, I should say, were being told by God that, guess what? You can't do it on your own. You've been lying about abortion. You've been lying about prostitution. Everything that you guys say you're not for, you're not. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a vessel on my own, and it's going to be the least likely, the least one you think it is. And normally we're looking low for poor people or for those who are uneducated. He chose high. Isn't that like God to surprise us every day?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a huge surprise. When I saw the actual assassination attempt, and I saw what happened, like the first thing I thought was like, yeah, that's the hand of God. I mean, there's no way that would have happened otherwise. It's just, he intervened, and I actually think it was probably a good thing that Trump wasn't president twice in succession, because people I think they just would have fought him to death. They wouldn't have appreciated him. They just would have I think his second presidency would have really maybe not gone nearly as far as it could. So people needed to see how bad things could get, and then they were ready to appreciate him more.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
I think it was good because of that, and I also believe it was good for President Trump personally, because I believe that President Trump, when I was listening to him at the end of his first term, and he was talking about stolen elections, etc., I think he started to think it was him. He runs again. He survives the assassination attempt, and I think I'm almost positive he became to realize, this is not me. This is God. And what you're seeing now is a transformed man spiritually.
Yeah, I believe you said you spoke to him. So you've spoken to him in person?
Yes, prior to when he was first running.
So what sense did you get versus what you see now when he's speaking?
That's part of the sense I got. The sense I got was sort of a flinger of against the system. I've ran billions of dollars. I know everyone. I can do it. I call you on your BS. You don't know what you're doing. You're dumb. You're this, you're that. I got it. There was a sense of arrogance to him the first time around. That arrogance is not there. Now, a sense of accomplishment is there. A sense of assurity is there. But the arrogance is pretty much gone away. Even if you listen to him now, it's much more humble, right? It is. He's still in your face. He still says, we got to stop making stupid. But if you listen now to him, even when he's off the cuff, not when he's got the speechwriters, but even off the cuff, there's a much bigger sense of humility there. There's a bigger sense of, but for the grace of God, there go I.
Well, I've seen different groups. There were a bunch of Latino pastors that prayed and put hands on him. There was, a bunch of African-American pastors that did before and after the election, white Christian evangelicals. Like, I've never seen that before. And I've seen cabinet meetings too, where they'll pray them in to start. Never seen that before.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see. It's amazing to see.
It's amazing to see. And the first time around, I do believe a lot of it was performative. I think there was some belief there, but a lot of it was performative. Trump, listen to his talk about abortion prior to him running for president. Listen to his talk about the transgender. He didn't care about these kinds of things. And I believe before it was like, okay, these guys support me. They want to pray for me. Well, it can't hurt. So sure, let them in and pray.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the second time around I've seen in the cabinet meetings, the second time around I've seen people pray for him. Now it's more heartfelt. If you look at the inauguration, right, and you saw the displays of faith there unabashed, I believe that this time around is different for the President Trump. And, I believe wholeheartedly that President Trump has understood and digested what's in Psalm, I think it's 14:1, right? It says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And I think what Trump has been trying to illustrate to us and what God himself is saying, you're a nation that started to run around and say there is no God. We're not talking about the details. Is it Catholic? Is it this? Is it a pope? No pope? A bishop? Is there speaking in tongues? Is there sitting quietly? But when you got to the place and you said, hey, there is no God, then look what happens to your nation. Remember when he turned Egypt over, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep.
That's what started. Think about that. The nation started to say, even conservatives started to say, there is no God. And when God moved his hand from America, we went crazy. Men or women, women or men. It's insane.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happened. I think God was in the first election. People were arrogant. Trump and the electorate were thinking, oh, MAGA world was like, we did it. So God said, fine, if you did it, do it again. They didn't do it again. And then people humbled themselves and prayed, and God is now beginning to heal our land.
Well, that's a great way of looking at it. I really hope that's the case, I guess, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. Again, I'm only one person, but it just feels like I personally was despairing a lot more before he got back into office. And I feel like a lot of people were despairing, and we were just being told, by all our dear leaders, like, we're bad, everything's bad. We need to eat bugs and, and this and that and not live. And when Trump came back, it was just a huge dam burst of hope that, when he came back, I felt, I don't know, it just felt like that. It seemed like, of course, there were people crying, which was, because they were on the other side. But I just felt a lot of hope from people, and personally, I did too.
Across evangelical America, across Baptist America, Pentecostal America, anyone that were center-right believing Christians, when Trump lost, I never saw so much prayer, so much crying out to God, so much saying, God, what are we going to do? They weren't relying on political consultants. They weren't relying on the pollsters. They said, you know what? If this is going to happen, it's going to have to be God, because the Democrats have academia. The Democrats have the media. The Democrats have Hollywood. And so what happened is there began to be a cry out to God, and I believe that God heard our cry.
And at the same time, it seems like the left, I don't think this is exaggeration. I just see more and more satanic imagery in everything they do. It's like, what's going on, man?
Of course.
It's weird that one side literally has appeared to embrace the devil. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, look at the Olympics. Look at the Tony Awards or whatever, the Academy, whatever crap it is. And then look at what the right has been doing. And they've been embracing God, and the left has been embracing the devil. It's literally a crazy polarization of the two.
Yeah, I agree. Because that's what you're seeing. What you're seeing is a manifestation of what we have learned in church growing up, right? It's Ephesians 6:12, right? I'm a King James Version guy. Ephesians 6:12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, and against the rulers of the dark of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. This is where he talks about putting on the whole armor of God. And so what you're seeing now is that true battle. This is not Democrat or Republican. This is why attacking transgenderism was so important, because at the very fundamental level, what was the very first thing that human beings understood as human beings that God did. For God created man, man goes to sleep, pulls a rib, creates woman. No matter the creation story of what faith you come from, it is in that base. God creates man, God creates woman. So what the demonic forces realized very early on was they tried to do all sorts of attacks. But then what the demonic forces realized was, you know what, we've got to attack the most fundamental thing. We need to shake that. Because if we can all of a sudden say a man is a woman and a woman is a man, then that erodes the very base for humanity's attachment to Christ, attachment to a God, attachment to any type of godly faith. And so that's why there's such a target. And you're seeing a push, I believe, within the Democrat Party, amongst the left, and even amongst some conservatives, but you're seeing a push of this wickedness, a push of this satanic imagery, because the demons are wrapped, because all of a sudden people are realizing this is, on the surface, it looks like immigration. On the surface, it looks like a sports fight. On the surface, it looks like an abortion pill fight, but it's not. We're wrestling against wickedness in high places.
Yeah, in high places, meaning, I guess, people that have positions that puts them in a position of power. Because that's exactly where I'm seeing it, is in the high places, yeah.
And think about France. Think about Canada. Think about the number of world leaders that are bowing down to something that they know is false, that are actually sanctioning in France, actually saying, yeah, you can take an 8-year-old boy, give him hormones, suppress him, as soon as he becomes 16, allow him to have a surgical removal of his male member. That is a fundamental attack on the very basis of which humanity was created. Because we're made in whose image? God's image. I don't want to get into a church podcast, but you get it.
No, I know what you mean. The thing to me is I'm now 50. By the time someone's, 35 or 40, your values are usually pretty much set. So it doesn't make sense to me to see people in their 40s, 50s, 60s that, a lot of them have children on their own. How could you embrace this? How could you all of a sudden say pedophilia is okay or any of this other stuff? It just doesn't make any logical sense to me.
It doesn't make any logical sense. But I think, though, there is some sense there. If you go back and you understand historically Pontius Pilate, if you understand King Herod, if you understand some of the biblical character, Peter is a good example. If you understand Judas, if you understand some of the biblical characters, what happened? They had very much a centered point of belief. And somewhere along the lines, demonic forces came along and off-centered their force of belief. And it can also happen in reverse. As a general human statement, you're right, psychology-wise, that about 35, you're centered, and where you are is where you are. But we have case after case in biblical example where individuals knew better. When Pontius Pilate washed his hands and says, I find no fault in him, he was centered on being an actual equitable ruler of what went on in Rome. What went on, he's like, listen, there's no fault here. There was nothing. If you understand King Herod, there was no history of King Herod doing anything such as ordering the death of the thousands of babies to find one baby. That was out of his character. Even Pharaoh acted out of his character, right? That's why the demonic forces, I believe, push so hard to say there is no God. Because once you say there is no God, you turn yourself over to a reprobate mind, as they say. That's old King James speak. So your mind begins to eat itself. And then you're like a wild animal. Now, it can happen in reverse, right? Donald Trump, who he was by 35, sleeping with tons of women, hanging out at the Playboy Mansion, doing whatever he wanted to do. And much later on in life, God changes his heart. So this shows you that both demonic forces and the cross can change your heart. So I think we have to be more humble in our understanding of human psychology.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like, I spoke to a lady today that was looking at a historical figure in the church, and she did really amazing things, but also did some really bad things. Or if you look at, let's say, Mother Teresa, I mean, supposedly she wasn't even close to being all good, but yet she did many good things, but also many very bad things. So I guess it's hard to, it's impossible to find someone that's, besides Jesus, that's all good. It's just everyone has just major flaws and needs help. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's true. Yeah, when Donald Trump was younger, right, he was a playboy. He did this, that, and the other, and he's very much changed. Yeah, you're right. He's very much humbled and and changed, and he came way late in his life, but he came at just the right moment.
I grew up in a black old Pentecostal church, and we used to have an old saying, God may not come when you want him, but he's always on time.
That's a cool saying. So what in your background has given you a unique perspective on Trump and on government affairs and all the other stuff? Like, what do you see that others don't see because of your background?
Well, there's a few things that give me a unique perspective on politics and this style. One of the first things that gives me a unique perspective is my grandmother. My grandmother's born in, 1917 Alabama, I believe. She saw real racism, right? For those of your listeners that don't know this, I'm actually Black American. And she saw real racism. She tells me a story once about being slapped in the face for looking at a white woman in the street and some other racism like this. One day we're driving along in a car and a guy cuts us off. And I must have been 8, maybe 7. I turned to my grandmother and said, oh my gosh, look at that white guy, he's racist. And my grandmother only swore maybe 4 times or 5 times that I have to think back, but no more than 5 times in her life. And this was one of them. She pulls over the car and she says, that's my middle name because my mother's name is Audrey and my father's name is Autry. So my family called me Jeremy. She says, Jeremy, let me share something with you, son. 1, most people are just assholes and they will use anything they can to get ahead. And then she's like, it's not racism. And this statement stuck with me and it changed the trajectory of how I look at life. She said, very simply, you cannot make my past your present. And that's coming from a woman. Well, I told you the story, and imagine the other story she has. In Alabama, right, when you couldn't walk in a store, when, there was no recourse, there was no courts. And she said, always remember you can do anything through Christ who strengthens you. Now, I didn't know that was a Bible verse at the time. I just thought it was my old grandmother talking. And that changed my life forever. And how that ends me up with Donald Trump, how that ends me up with the Republicans, how that ends me up with conservatives was real simple. If I can do anything, I don't need government to do it. I don't need an academic to do it for me. I don't need a big company to do it for me. I can do it. I just have to figure out how. I've got to be a realist. I've got to be practical. I've got to understand I'm not going to wake up with no exercise, no running, no anything, and all of a sudden be able to be on the basketball team with the Chicago Bulls. But you can achieve and you can do because I can do it. No one else can do it for me. I can. My grandmother wasn't intending for that message to me to be a conservative message, but that is my anchor point. That one statement right there is my anchor point,
Well, what does it help you? What would have been some of the toughest? You don't have to describe details, but
that's Philippians 4:13, by the way.
Okay.
For those of you keeping track.
But I mean, in your toughest moments, like where did resilience and resolve come from within you?
Christ. It wasn't me. It was Christ. I didn't have some people would look at my childhood. I could tell some stories and they would think it was tough, but it wasn't that tough in comparison to others. There have been others that have had way tougher times than mine. Mine wasn't the easiest, but in comparison to what I've seen, it was actually pretty decent. But for some of the adversity, it's Christ. Even the stuff I face today, I'm divorced. I have 2 kids.